Murder in Maplewood, a Pippa Redwell mystery. Chapter 1. Tea and Trouble. The rain had stopped just in time for the Maplewood Garden Society's annual flower show, and the village green gleamed with dew under a soft June sun. Tables groaned under the weight of petunias, roses, dahlias, and the ever-competitive marrow entries, while bunting fluttered from tent to tent like cheerful birds in flight. Pippa Redwell, semi-retired librarian and full-time observer of human foibles, surveyed the scene from behind her teacup. "It's all going to end in tears," she muttered to her cat, Marjorie, who blinked back without concern. At 72, with a silver bun, pinned neatly in spectacles that somehow made her look both formidable and kindly, Pippa had an unerring instinct for trouble. In fact, she'd found it, or rather, it had found her, more times than she cared to count. Maplewood might seem like the sort of sleepy village where the only crime was a missing jam tart, but that was just on the surface. Underneath, secrets brewed like oversteeped Earl Grey. And today her nose told her something was off. Not just off, positively rancid. Chapter 2. The prize-winning problem. The Marrow Prize was the crown jewel of the flower show. Every year, a dozen villages competed for it with almost unseemly passion. And this year's frontrunner was none other than Cyril Pym, retired postmaster, notorious gossip, and owner of a particularly monstrous vegetable that looked more like a curled green dragon than anything edible. "I say," came a voice behind Pippa, "he's guarding that thing like it's the crown jewels." It was Agnes Everleigh, president of the Garden Society, in her usual wide-brimmed hat, and pearls too tight for comfort. She nodded towards Cyril, who was hunched over his marrow, as if shielding it from assassins. He wouldn't even let the judges near it until they washed their hands. Twice. Pippa sipped her tea. "He does seem rather intense this year." Agnes leaned in conspiratorially. "Word is he's using something unnatural. Fertilizer from Holland. Illegally imported, if you ask me. Good heavens. A contraband marrow." Pippa raised an eyebrow. "What next? Smuggling begonias across the border?" Agnes smiled tightly. Wouldn't put it past him. But before they could go on, a commotion erupted by the prize table. Shouts, gasps, and finally, a scream. Everyone turned. Cyril Pym was on the ground, face down in the turf. His prized marrow lay beside him, split open like a melon. Dead as last week's daffodils. Chapter 3. The Detective and the Widow. Constable Henry Blunt arrived 20 minutes later, notebook in hand and expression as grim as overcast weather. "Natural causes," he said after a cursory look. Poor fellow had a weak heart. But Pippa wasn't so sure. "He was sprightly just this morning," she told the constable. "Jogged past my house, full of beans." Blunt sniffed. "He was 74. So's Dame Judy Dench. You don't see her keeling over by a marrow." He gave her a look. "I don't suppose you'll let me handle this one on my own." "Wouldn't dream of it," she replied sweetly. By the following day, rumors had grown like weeds. Poisoned tea, a hidden wasp sting, a curse from a rival gardener. But Pippa suspected something more old-fashioned. Motive. She started with Cyril's widow, Daphne Pym, who lived in a lavender-scented bungalow on Mistletoe Lane. He was puffed up like a rooster all week. Daphne sniffled into her lace handkerchief. "Said he had it in the bag." "The prize?" Pippa asked. "No. The inheritance." Pippa's eyes narrowed. "Whose inheritance?" Daphne hesitated. "His cousin died in Sussex last month. Left Cyril a tidy sum, but only if he kept out of trouble. No lawsuits. No public scandals." "How curious," Pippa murmured. "Cyril was planning to rub it in everyone's faces at the flower show. You know how he was." She did, but someone else must have known too. Chapter 4. Seeds of Suspicion. Back at the village green, the marrow lay under a tarp, its innards turning unpleasantly. "Mind if I look?" Pippa asked the constable. He shrugged. "I've stopped trying to stop you." She examined the vegetable closely. The cut wasn't random, it was clean, deliberate. And something glinted inside. She fished it out with a gloved hand. A metal shard, too sharp to be gardening equipment. She took it home, washed it, and held it up to the light. It was part of a sewing needle, embedded inside the marrow. "Now what on earth were you doing in there?" she asked aloud. Marjorie yawned in response. The next morning, Pippa made her way to Stitch and Bloom, the village sewing and plant shop run by none other than Belinda Rose, Maplewood's champion quilter and past loser of the Marrow Prize 3 years in a row. "Belinda," Pippa said, placing the shard on the counter, "recognize this?" Belinda's face went pale. "That looks like one of mine." "But I didn't. I never—" "Someone embedded it in Cyril's marrow. He must have cut himself preparing it. Or worse." Belinda leaned forward. "I swear I didn't do it. But I sold Cyril a bag of potting mix last week. Second hand, from Mrs. Tilling." Pippa blinked. "The herbalist. She said it was organic. I didn't check." And just like that, the plot thickened. Chapter 5. Herbs and Hypocrisy. Mrs. Tilling lived on the edge of town, in a thatched cottage, surrounded by herbs, bees, and rumors. She opened the door in a cloud of lavender. "Pippa Redwell, I wondered when you'd come calling." "You sold Cyril some potting soil?" Pippa asked. "Indeed. I make my own blend. Good for root vegetables. No needles, I assure you." "Do you sell to Belinda Rose?" "Among others. But I did see something odd this week." Pippa leaned in. Cyril was arguing with Arthur Peck over by the churchyard. Arthur Peck, local solicitor, terrible gardener, worse temper. "What about?" "Something about changing the will and ruining everything." Well, that evening, Pippa baked a plum cake and delivered it to Arthur's door under the pretense of charity. Arthur opened it with suspicion. "I'm not ill," he grunted. "No, but I've questions." Arthur sighed. "This is about Cyril, isn't it? I'm told you were upset with him." "About a will." Arthur hesitated. He wanted to cut out his niece, Claire. Said she was a disgrace. "Disgrace how?" "Some business with forged art in Brighton. She's a painter." "Did he succeed?" Arthur nodded. "I filed the paperwork. But he said if anything happened to him before the prize was awarded, he'd reconsider." Pippa sat up straighter. "Why?" "Because the prize meant prestige. Village respect, he called it. If he died before he won, the family would say he was a joke. Said he'd reverse everything, which meant someone might have had motive to make sure he did win. But just barely." Chapter 6. A Twist in the Vine. On Sunday, the village gathered in the church hall to celebrate Cyril's legacy. The marrow, preserved in photographs, had won the prize posthumously. Claire, the niece in question, gave a glowing speech oddly emotional for someone recently disinherited. Pippa watched her carefully. That evening, she visited Cyril's shed. It had been locked since his death, but Daphne gave her the key. Inside were pots, fertilizer bags, and a packet of herbs de Provence. She opened it. Needles, sewing needles, hidden among the thyme and rosemary. Whoever had tampered with the marrow hadn't expected anyone to go sniffing about. But Pippa Redwell always did. Chapter 7. Truth in Bloom. The next day, Pippa invited all suspects to tea. Daphne, Belinda, Mrs. Tilling, Arthur Peck, and Claire. She served scones, jam, and accusations. Someone embedded needles in Cyril's marrow, she said. Not to kill him, not directly, but to give him a cut. One that became infected. A death by 1,000 pricks. The room gasped. Only someone with access to both gardening supplies and sewing equipment could manage it without raising suspicion. Someone who knew Cyril's habits, his vanity, his plans. She turned to Claire. "You were disinherited, but you knew he'd change the will if he won the prize." Claire's lip trembled. "You baked a rosemary tart the night before the show, sprinkled with herbs de Provence. He didn't suspect a thing." "Prove it," Claire hissed. "I don't have to," Pippa replied, "because Daphne already found the empty packet in your bag." Daphne stood, pale but resolute. "I didn't know what it meant until now." Claire stood, knocking over her teacup. "He ruined everything. Called me a fraud. Said I was no real artist." "Perhaps not," Pippa said gently. "But you've got a knack for drama." Epilogue. Peace in the garden. Claire was taken in for questioning. No one in Maplewood would press charges, but the will, as it stood, left everything to the widow. Constable Blunt offered Pippa a consulting detective badge made out of felt. She declined. Too flashy, she said. Later, she sat on her back porch with Marjorie, sipping tea and admiring her roses. "You see, my dear," she murmured, "it's always the quiet ones you must watch, especially when they're armed with needles." And with that, she opened her book and waited for the next mystery to bloom. The end.
It's time to study new words and idioms in context. 1. Gleamed. Definition: to shine or glow softly, often reflecting light in a bright and pleasing way. Example: the polished silverware gleamed in the candlelight. 2. Bunting flower. Definition: a type of flowering plant, often small and decorative, used in gardens for its colorful blooms. Example: the bunting flowers swayed gently in the summer breeze. 3. Fluttered. Definition: to move or wave quickly and lightly, often in an irregular way, like the wings of a butterfly. Example: the bird fluttered its wings before taking off into the sky. 4. Foibles. Definition: small weaknesses or strange habits in someone's character that are usually harmless. Example: her love for collecting teacups was one of her harmless foibles. 5. Bun. Definition: a small round bread roll, or a hairstyle in which hair is twisted and fastened in a round shape. Example: she wore her hair in a neat bun for the interview. 6. Formidable. Definition: inspiring fear or respect because of being large, powerful, or difficult to deal with. Example: the mountain presented a formidable challenge to the hikers. 7. Unerring. Definition: always accurate and correct, never making mistakes. Example: he had an unerring sense of direction in the forest. 8. Tart. Definition: having a sharp, sour taste can also mean speaking in a quick, sharp manner. Example: the lemonade was tart, but refreshing on a hot day. 9. Oversteeped. Definition: soaked in liquid for too long, often making the taste too strong or bitter. Example: the tea was oversteeped and had a harsh, bitter flavor. 10. Rancid. Definition: having a foul or unpleasant smell or taste, often because of being old or spoiled. Example: the rancid butter made the bread inedible. 11. Leaned in. Definition: to bend or move closer to someone or something, often to hear better or show interest. Example: she leaned in to whisper the secret. 12. Unseemly. Definition: not proper or appropriate for the situation, socially unacceptable. Example: laughing loudly at the funeral was considered unseemly. 13. Contraband. Definition: goods that are illegal to make, own, or trade. Example: the police seized the contraband hidden in the truck. 14. Begonias. Definition: bright, flowering plants with colorful petals, often grown in gardens or as houseplants. Example: the garden beds were filled with pink and red begonias. 15. As last week's daffodils. Definition: a simile meaning faded, past its best, or no longer fresh. Example: his enthusiasm was as last week's daffodils by the end of the long meeting. 16. As grim as overcast weather. Definition: a simile describing something very sad, hopeless, or depressing. Example: her expression was as grim as overcast weather after hearing the bad news. 17. Cursory. Definition: done quickly and without enough attention to detail. Example: he gave the document only a cursory glance before signing. 18. Sprightly. Definition: full of energy and liveliness, especially in an older person. Example: the sprightly old men dance with the children at the fair. 19. Full of beans. Definition: very energetic and enthusiastic. Example: the children were full of beans after eating cake at the party. 20. Keeling. Definition: tilting or leaning to one side, often used for boats or people losing balance. Example: the small boat was keeling in the strong waves. 21. Innard. Definition: an inner organ of a person or animal, often used in the plural innards. Example: the butcher removed the innards before preparing the meat. 22. Glinted. Definition: shown briefly with a small, bright flash of light. Example: the diamond glinted in the sunlight. 23. Shard. Definition: a broken piece of a hard material, usually glass, metal, or pottery. Example: he stepped carefully to avoid the shards of broken glass. 24. Hypocrisy. Definition: pretending to have moral beliefs or standards that you do not actually follow. Example: his speech against greed was pure hypocrisy, considering his own wealth. 25. Grunted. Definition: made a short, deep sound from the throat, often to show effort, annoyance, or agreement. Example: he grunted as he lifted the heavy box. 26. Posthumously. Definition: occurring or being given after someone has died. Example: the soldier was awarded the medal posthumously. 27. Among the thyme and rosemary. Definition: a phrase suggesting being surrounded by herbs, often evoking a peaceful garden scene. Example: the cottage was nestled among the thyme and rosemary in the backyard. 28. Resolute. Definition: firmly determined, not giving up in purpose or belief. Example: she remained resolute in her decision despite criticism. 29. Knack. Definition: a natural skill or talent for doing something easily and well. Example: he has a knack for solving tricky puzzles.
Comprehension questions. 1. Question: what annual event is taking place at the beginning of the story? Answer: the Maplewood Garden Society's annual flower show. 2. Question: who is the main character in the story? And what is her background? Answer: Pippa Redwell, a semi-retired librarian and amateur sleuth. 3. Question: what kind of pet does Pippa have, and what is its name? Answer: a cat named Marjorie. 4. Question: what prize is everyone competing for at the flower show? Answer: the Marrow Prize. 5. Question: who is Cyril Pym, and why is he important to the plot? Answer: he is a retired postmaster, and the frontrunner in the Marrow competition. He later dies mysteriously. 6. Question: what suspicious behavior did Cyril display before the competition? Answer: he was extremely protective of his marrow, even making judges wash their hands twice before approaching it. 7. Question: how does Cyril Pym die? Answer: he collapses and dies at the flower show next to his split-open marrow. 8. Question: what object does Pippa find inside the broken marrow? Answer: a shard of a sewing needle. 9. Question: who is Belinda Rose, and how is she connected to the case? Answer: she runs a sewing and plant shop and sold Cyril potting mix that came from Mrs. Tilling. 10. Question: what clue connects Belinda's shop to the murder weapon? Answer: the needle found in the marrow matched the kind she uses for sewing. 11. Question: what odd ingredient does Pippa find in Cyril's garden shed? Answer: a packet labeled Herbes de Provence that was filled with sewing needles. 12. Question: who is Arthur Peck, and what did Pippa learn from him? Answer: he's a local solicitor who revealed that Cyril changed his will to disinherit his niece, Claire. 13. Question: why would Claire want Cyril to win the prize before he died? Answer: because he planned to reinstate her in his will only if he won, to preserve his village respect. 14. Question: what dish did Claire allegedly use to deliver the hidden needles? Answer: a rosemary tart. 15. Question: how does Pippa finally expose the killer? Answer: she invites the suspects to tea, lays out the evidence, and Daphne Pym confirms finding the empty needle packet in Claire's bag.